Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. The powerful poetry of Charles Bukowski. I started looking at this in a little bit more depth last week, in last week's video, in particular inspired by a performance of his work read by the actor who goes by the name of Tom Bedlam. Well worth your time. Very short, a few minutes, but I think poetry, ideas for life philosophy that really does cut to the very heart of what it means to be creative, well, what it means to be alive. And this week I thought I'd just focus on these two lines. Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Because it struck me that probably for most of us that are listening, or in my case making this video, listening to, you probably don't imagine that your life has been clubbed into dank submission. I mean, it's easy to see how Bukowski came to choose these words. He grew up in tough, deprived circumstances. I think he was abused by an alcoholic father. He lived a pretty miserable existence at the bottom of the social tree. Worked in a post office in some sort of depressing menial job. And he was fighting against, I suppose, giving up really. Giving up who he saw himself to be. But that's not us, is it? I mean, we lead good lives. No one's clubbing us. But I think that's what I want to focus on this week. That I think society sort of knocks you into shape in many different ways. And beating down on you, metaphorically or otherwise, is only one of them. I mean, where I live, there are a lot of people I think have been clubbed into dank submission. Whether they're happy or not, quite early on, it's been made very clear to them, sometimes actually consciously, but in a deeper sort of subconscious way. It's been made very clear to them not to expect too much out of life. Of course, they don't seem particularly unhappy where I live, because this is a beautiful place. And whilst I wouldn't say we're sort of great leaders in the on the socio-economic totem pole, on the other hand, there are no really obvious signs of deprivation. People are leading basically quite happy, nice little lives. But I think what Bukowski's driving at is the point of giving up on your dreams, or not even having them in the first place. Accepting a status quo, that this is the way the world is. And just be satisfied with whatever it is you've got, how little or however much that might be. And in the poem, he talks about, there's a light that be on the watch, because the gods will give you chances. There will be ways out of your circumstances. Again, in I suppose in Bukowski's life, it was all quite literal. But I think today, it's not that we've been clubbed into dank submission. Our submission isn't dank, and there is no physical coercion in it. But it is a submission nonetheless. And the coercion is a subtle persuasion, a sort of mind control. And I don't mean that in some sort of grand conspiracy theory sort of way, but we are encouraged to accept that there is a way to behave in the modern world that is acceptable and a way that isn't. And in our modern world, that way is consumption. So we're not clubbed into dank submission. We are tempted into it, lured. And rather like the children in the Pied Piper of Hamelin, they hear the beautiful music and they follow the piper into the dark mountain, never to be seen again. The only one who survives in the Pied Piper of Hamelin is a crippled boy. And it does seem, it's quite an interesting kind of metaphorical idea, that very often the ones who don't submit to this conformist, limited view of what life can be are very often people who, like Bukowski, to some degree have been damaged. I identify with all of that. I don't think any of that sort of personal biography applies to me. I led the most fortunate of lives. But actually, when I've looked back on it over the last few years, for example, the fixed mindset, the idea that you can be this and not that, that you're born with certain potentials. This is very much tuned in to Bukowski's poetic vision. And we are sold on the idea that, it's all very limited, and all we have to look forward to is the next new thing that we can buy that will alleviate our pain and suffering. I mean, not that we are particularly in the middle class Western world in pain or suffering, not in an obvious sort of way. But I think on a deeper level, I think we are. If there is some sort of spiritual bankruptcy, well, this expresses itself, maybe not in an obviously painful sort of way, but it is a form of suffering. And the fact that we live in the most affluent of times, the most fortunate golden era in humankind's steady march of progress, the fact that in the most affluent of these societies, suicide and depression are on the increase, I think, that tells it all. Something is amiss. But we don't need to accept this. If we are on the lookout, there is a way out, and I believe the way out is through creative expression, whatever that might mean for each one of us. By creative expression, I don't specifically mean the arts. That creative expression, the way you fulfill yourself might be done in the most unlikely of places. But there is a way if you're on the lookout. And people don't want you to break free. They want you to conform to whatever the social norms are, the broader sort of structural expectations. They want you to be that way. Some people want you to be that way because our economic system relies on it. And those who have most to benefit from this particular system will do everything they can to maintain it. But it is something that we have constructed, so we could construct something else instead. And you have the option of choosing another way, of keeping your spirit alive. I think you have the option, and you have, I believe, the obligation. We are obliged to do this because if we don't, who will? So our sort of act of defiance is in leading a purposeful, creative life that is in the service of other people, not ourselves. This as an alternative to leading a conformist life that is driven by our own ego, but ultimately is for most of us in service of other people to our detriment. Well, that's all quite vague. I think I'm going to have to listen to this one, unpick it a little, see what makes sense, see what doesn't, and lead on to another sort of reimagining of all of this next week. I'm not sure how this is going to appear in the wonderful world of YouTube, because at the moment I am struggling with my computer. It will need to be replaced, I suspect. But none of that's going to happen because we're about to head into, or we are heading in today, to Brazil's Carnival weekend, which is another form of clubbing us into dank submission through what is outwardly a lot of fun. Everyone's going to have a wonderful time. But, well, I have my doubts now about all of this. Still, I'll probably go out, join the crowd, have a beer or two, keep my more philosophical thoughts to myself, be cheerful, and then when I'm suitably anaesthetized, come home and hopefully be able to sleep through the relentless drumming. And so there we are. That's it for this week. I trust your lives are filled with joy, that you have not been clubbed into dank submission, whatever that might mean. And until next week, from sunny Brazil, ciao.